Part 1, Chapter 2, Section 13. The Opposition. When kings have to be moved, and one player can, by force, bring his king into a position similar to the one shown in the following diagram, so that his adversary is forced to move and make way for him, the player obtaining that advantage is said to have the opposition. Example 26. Suppose in the above position white plays King d4. Now black has the option of either opposing the passage of the white king by playing King d6, or, if he prefers, he can pass with his own king by replying King f5. Notice that the kings are directly opposed to each other, and the number of intervening squares between them is odd, 1 in this case. The opposition can take this form shown above, which can be called actual or close frontal opposition, or this form, which can be called actual or close diagonal opposition, or again this form, which can be called actual or close lateral opposition. In practice, they are all one and the same. The kings are always on squares of the same color. There is only one intervening square between the kings, and the player who has moved last has the opposition. Now, if the student will take the trouble of moving each king backwards as in a game in the same frontal, diagonal, or lateral line, respectively shown in the diagrams, we shall have what may be called a distant frontal, diagonal, and lateral opposition respectively. The matter of the opposition is highly important and takes at times somewhat complicated forms, all of which can be solved mathematically. But for the present, the student should only consider the most simple forms. An examination of some of the examples of King and Pawn endings already given will show several cases of close opposition. In all simple forms of opposition, when the kings are on the same line and the number of intervening squares between them is even, the player who has the move has the opposition. Example 27. The above position shows to advantage the enormous value of the opposition. The position is very simple. Very little is left on the board, and the position, to a beginner, probably looks absolutely even. It is not the case, however. Whoever has the move wins. Notice that the kings are directly in front of one another, and that the number of intervening squares is even. Now, as to the procedure to win such a position, the proper way to begin is to move straight up, thus: King e2, King e7, King e3, King e6, King e4, King f6. Now, white can exercise the option of either playing King d5 and thus passing with his king, or of playing King f4 and prevent the black king from passing, thereby keeping the opposition. Mere counting will show that the former course will only lead to a draw. Therefore, white takes the latter course and plays King f4, King g6. If King e6, then King g5 will win. King e5, King g7. Now by counting, it will be seen that white wins by capturing black's knight pawn. The process has been comparatively simple in the variation given above, but black has other lines of defense more difficult to overcome. Let us begin anew. King e2, King d8. Now, if King d3, then King d7, or if King e3, King e7, and black obtains the opposition in both cases. When the kings are directly in front of one another, and the number of intervening squares between the kings is odd, the player who has moved last has the opposition. Now, in order to win, the white king must advance. There is only one other square where he can go, f3, and that is the right place. Therefore, it is seen that in such cases when the opponent makes a so-called waiting move, you must advance, leaving a rank or file free between the kings. Therefore, we have King f3, King e7. Now, it would be bad to advance because then black, by bringing up his king in front of your king, would obtain the opposition. It is white's turn to play a similar move to black's first move, King e3, which brings the position back to the first variation shown. The student would do well to familiarize himself with the handling of the king in all examples of opposition. It often means the winning or losing of a game. Example 28. The following position is an excellent proof of the value of the opposition as a means of defense. White is a pawn behind and apparently lost, yet he can manage to draw as follows. King h1. The position of the pawns does not permit white to draw by means of the actual or close opposition. Hence, he takes the distant opposition. In effect, if King f1, actual or close opposition, King d2, King f2, King d3, and white cannot continue to keep the lateral opposition essential to his safety because of his own pawn at f3. On the other hand, after the text move, if King h1, King d2, King h2, King d3, King h3, King e2, King g2, King e3, King g3, King d4, King g4. Attacking the pawn and forcing black to play King e3, when he can go back to g3, King g3, as already shown, and always keep the opposition. Going back to the original position, if King h1, g4. White does not play f takes g4 because e4 will win, but plays King g2, King d2. If g takes f3 check, then King takes f3, followed by King e4 will draw. F takes g4, e4. And mere counting will show that both sides queen, drawing the game. If the student will now take the trouble to go back to the examples of king and pawns, which I have given in this book, he will realize that in all of them the matter of the opposition is of paramount importance, as in fact it is in nearly all endings of king and pawns, except in such cases where the pawn position in itself ensures the win.